Hello, I'm the Pink Phantom. Welcome to my podcast, where we will go deep into the lair of the purple worm instead of down into the rabbit hole, where we'll voyage into the astral realm of my mind and explore the verse of nerd culture. This is Phantom Thoughts. So for this episode in OctOSR, I want to talk about Rule Zero. Now, a lot of people have been talking about Rule Zero, and mainly why I want to go about is not Rule Zero itself, but why Rule Zero? Why is Rule Zero such an important part of the original way that people played role-playing games, and has been included in many cases in one form or another, even well into the modern role-playing game era? And for that, you have to go back to the wargaming origins of role-playing. Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson were members of wargaming clubs, and the role-playing hobby developed within these clubs. And one of the things it developed out of is the notion of war games based on the old Prussian Kriegspiel. And they had a form of Kriegspiel, free Kriegspiel, where the rules were not as tightly put together, where there were just general rules, and it was on a neutral referee to apply the rules as they fit the situation and to make rulings. So your rulings not rules, rulings over rules idea in the OSR originates from that as well. But the referee was just that, a referee, a neutral arbiter of the rules. The referee would come up with a scenario in a lot of cases and give the players what resources they had available to them and what their goals were. But the players themselves were each other's antagonists. In the case of the Kriegspiel, they were maneuvering armies. In the case of the Braunstein scenario that Dave Wesley originated out of a Kriegspiel-style game, they were individual people, each with their own kind of goals. And some of them coincided and some of them didn't. So there could be a lot of negotiating between players, and they could work with each other or against each other, because he also drew from the board game Diplomacy from Avalon Hill, where players were each trying to individually win that game, but they had to work together to advance their own cause, which could result in a lot of bad feeling because they would make deals and some of them wouldn't follow through on them. And there are a lot of urban legends about years-long friendships ending over a game of diplomacy because of the betrayal. But getting back to Rule Zero, the notion of Rule Zero was to instill in new game masters, in what was a new hobby, the mindset needed to succeed. Because in role-playing games, the game master does serve the role of the referee, the arbiter of the rules, and making rulings where the rules don't 100% seem to apply exactly. But the game master is also the player of the world. All the things that are antagonistic to the player characters are played by the game master. And some of those things are trying to kill or destroy the player characters. So the GM has to do that. So I think a lot of the reason why this is such an emphasis in the early era of role-playing and therefore has become kind of a mainstay of the OSR to emphasize this Rule Zero is because the people who would be playing these games, I believe, for Gary Gygax and Dave Arneson, believe that these would be wargamers because that's the background they came from. And you're trying to instill a different mindset from just being a neutral referee to being someone who sometimes has to act against the player character interests. Now, you don't want to do that just whole hog, because with the resources a game master has, they have the whole world behind them. They could simply crush the player characters whenever they feel like it in many cases, especially in OSR-style games where the player characters start off maybe a little more vulnerable than more modern iterations of player characters do. But to get that hybrid thought process of rules, arbiter, and antagonist to the players, to get those two things together. And I also believe that this is why instilling a different mindset is why Gary Gygax seems in the AD&D Dungeon Master's Guide to encourage game masters to be kind of mean to their players, to telling them that this guide is entirely for you, and if players put their hands on it or they act on the knowledge of it, they should be punished in game for it. Because this is a different type of game than the war game. This is a different type of game than what has been out there prior to the establishment of D&D and its predecessors, Braunstein and Greyhawk and Blackmore. So just trying to get that mindset that there's some things that the DM is going to know that the players aren't going to know. Now, does Gary go overboard? Yes, but I mean, from all things I've seen, Gary tended to go overboard on a lot of stuff. But that's just my take on Rule Zero and why the AD&D DM's Guide, the first edition of it, why it reads how it does in some places. It's trying to instill that different mindset that before role-playing largely did not exist, unless somebody was just a completely mean referee in wargaming, which probably happened because, let's face it, there are people that like to be mean. They get it works for them, they think. But that's my little take on it. What do you think? Let me know. And that's going to do it for another episode of Phantom Thoughts. If you have any feedback you'd like to leave, you can contact me by leaving a voice message at anchor.fm/the-pink-phantom, or you can send an email to thepinkphantom1@gmail.com, or you can contact me on Twitter @thepinkphantom. The music in this episode was Strength of the Titans and Late Night Radio by Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 4.0 license from creativecommons.org/licenses/by/4.0.